Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 13th and Republic panel discussion with four of our amazing artists. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator this evening. My name is Audrey Berteau. I'm the producing artistic director of Walter Hoop, and our moderator this evening is Darrell Collier. Darrell is the assistant professor of education and leadership at Miami University. He's an artist scholar, and his research documents and interrogates the lived experience of Black youth and how discourses of race and sexuality order the lives of Black youth and their communities. So we are so very honored to have Darrell with us to moderate this amazing panel, and I will let Darrell take it away from here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Audrey. Thank you all for being here and for this amazing work. I'm super excited to be here. And I just want to go ahead and get us started with you all introducing yourselves. And if you could maybe talk just a little bit in your introduction also about your role in 13th and Republic. And so anybody can start.
Hey, my name is Montez Jenkins, and I played Apollo, who was the narrator and the heartbeat there and lost of 13th Republic.
Hi there, I'm Darnell Pierre Benjamin. I am the director and choreographer of the film.
Hi, I'm Khalil Skyrick. I started this project back in 2001 with its first performance with collaborators, and we have now done it a couple of times, each time changing, and now we're coming into 2021 and we've done it again. And so I composed the music, and we'll turn it over, I guess, to Tyrone. He's next.
Hi, I'm Tyrone Williams, and I'm the lyricist, I guess, for 13th and Republic.
All right, thank you all for that. I'm looking over here at our YouTube live, and so far no questions, but don't worry because I have some, but just everybody singing your praises, and from one word reactions of it being very powerful, people talking about it being moving. And so I just wanted to bring that over to our conversation and just sort of reiterate that this work has been in the works since 2001 till now, and that people are still being moved and touched since then into this moment. I guess to get us started with a question, could you all maybe talk a little bit about, now that we're sort of, I guess at a bit of a beginning, ending, it's the premiere, so it's sort of a culmination in some ways, but also a beginning. If maybe you all could each or whoever talk about something that surprised you or still deeply resonates with you about the work.
I could start that. I am very type A. I like order, I like planning, I like things to make sense. I'm the person who, before I go to bed, I have a checklist of things that I need to get done tomorrow that keep me up for another hour past the time I plan on sleeping. And then I wake up and I start doing those things. And I think the thing that surprised me more than anything about this process is the joy I had in the moments of structured improv. I'm usually terrified of going in with dancers without more than just a structure. I like to come in with choreography. This is what every moment is. And there were a couple moments in the film where I went in more so with a structure and a streamline of a story that I wanted to be told in that moment. And for example, in scene 3, I particularly was so just mind blown by how much the performers played, how much they took the concept took the story and took off with it. Like I attribute that scene to the performers, because they just brought to life an idea, a flicker of an idea, and it was organic and in the moment and honest. And that was probably the biggest surprise to me, was those moments where the dancers really just took over and made it come to life in a way that I could not have created on my own. The joy of, right, working together, the group of people. So that was probably my biggest surprise, honestly.
I
One of
think,
the, oh,
okay.
okay, I'll go. Okay. Hey, thanks, Montez. So there's a number by the gospel choir, the first one, called Two Humans Meet. And we talk about blue and black. And later at the end, we talk about who's going to take a step, the first step, and who we're going to meet in between. And I really, although I've worked with Tyrone and I've worked with those words for quite a while, this time around, given the context we've had in the public conversation, the public space we've been in with continued shootings, those words became very important to me. And the word meet took on a huge meaning to me. If we can't meet and exchange the information, black and blue, that we need to remedy this public safety crisis, we can't do it. And we've got to meet. And when you and I meet, that means I listen to you and I tell you what you know or what you said to me, and you listen to me and you tell me that you heard me and you understand what I'm saying. It's got to go both ways, ladies and gentlemen. And so that's what happens in the music. We trade off the verses. It's a pretty simple, straightforward song that Dan Larkin wrote. But I just, all of a sudden I went, yeah. I connected that point and the end point, and I thought, yeah, there is a way forward. Are we going to meet? There's a thought for you.
For me, one of the things that really surprised me that I give so much value to was, before we started rehearsal, I was asked by Darnell and Tyrone to jump on a call with them and work through the text, to play for a bit and bring it to life, but also for my opinion on ways to help embody the character more and carry this over from the translation of stage to film. And as an actor, as an artist, that gave me so much value, and it also allowed me to put more roots and heart into this project, because I was a part of it just that much more, and it was quite a surprise.
I think for me, and this has been true since Khalil and I first collaborated on this project. For me to hear the music in this new setting now, in a film as opposed to in a live theater, was a new appreciation of just how powerful the music is. I think the first time we were sitting in that auditorium at Xavier University, I was so nervous, speaking of nervous, that I couldn't really concentrate on the performance, because of, people, friends around and so forth, and wondering what everybody would think. But this time, in this particular iteration, particularly because it was film, and so the music is, recorded soundtrack, it was, I had a new appreciation for the power of the music. It just, it was amazing.
Okay. I want to sort of bounce off some of the various things that you all shared in terms of your surprises and synthesize some of the questions that we have in the live chat, to maybe talk about what was the overall sort of vision and intent that you brought, given your various roles, and some of the specific questions, right, are like, or specific questions from folks on the chat. are directed towards, like Darnell, for example, to talk a little bit more about the choreo, or Montez to talk about like what you were bringing to the role specifically as you were performing. So sort of just broadly and generally, like what was your vision and intent that you brought to this? And maybe if you could talk on some of those specifics that people are really looking for, those like juicy details of how did you do that amazing thing that you did for us?
Oh boy, where do you start, right? So this story has been in my head for a long time now, and it mostly comes from conversations that I've had with many people on Black Lives Matter and, police brutality and the issues that and the challenges that Black people have to face in this country. And what I was noticing over the years is that every single time we talked about these things, always it would always go back, for example, like, the police. But I always wondered, well, what happens when we look at this from the perspective of mental health? Like, what's really going on? Not just with, for example, you have the whole chain reaction situation of the Black person being affected and thereby their mental health being affected, but also looking at it from the police officer's perspective. What the hell is going on in his head when he chooses to pull the trigger whenever he sees an unarmed person? Even if, for example, he thinks there may be a weapon, why is he shooting him in the heart? Why is he shooting him in the head? Why is he shooting him in the back? All of those questions started coming up for me, and it came down to mental health. And what was so important for me, especially adding on to that, the music, when I was listening to the music, I heard this, I was describing it to Khalil as this container, and the sounds were pushing out on every end of the container trying to escape. The music felt very much like that to me, which matched up to thinking about everything that goes on, for example, in my head as a Black man, and especially add on top of that, a Black queer man. Every single day I walk out, there was a period of time, for example, here in Cincinnati, where I was probably called either a nigger or a faggot every other day. It was so, I was so used to it. And I was thinking about the assault of that constant barrage of people telling you, you don't deserve to be here, So that was ultimately at the core of what brought the story together for me. It was thinking about the mental health aspect. And yes, obviously, I am not the spokesperson for every Black person out there at all. I just was coming from it with my perspective. I feel like we can't talk about Black Lives Matter. We can't talk about police brutality. We can't talk about any of that without talking about mental health. So for me, the film was an opportunity for me to try and explore a little bit of expressionism. I'm really fascinated by the expressionist movement. I take a lot of my personal performance perspective from Michael Chekhov technique and Tanz theater. I love storytelling with movement. And another thing for me, when it comes down to the choreo, it came from a very expressionistic perspective. I played in the studio quite a bit because, hey, we were in a pandemic. I had a lot of time to play. And so I just played, and I knew I didn't want it to be dance in the traditional way that we think of it. I wanted it to be movement storytelling. And it's also why I wanted people who were solidly actors who also dance. That was so important to me, is that I wanted people who came from that perspective. And when it comes down to it, I guess at the end of the day, what really propelled me through all of this was constantly checking in on my own mental health and being aware of that and seeing that reflected elsewhere in every interaction I come into with people. And also on top of that, we were happenstance, we're in a pandemic where that kind of propelled even more of the need for that conversation. So yeah, that's the concept was purely looking at how police brutality affects the Black community, and not just the Black community, but the entire American ness of it all. Everything is affected by this. So, and no one is exempt, not one single person. Just because you're white does not mean that you are not affected by police brutality and its effect on you and everybody else around you. So that was the angle. And also, I do want to bring it to one point, is that it was important to me that despite it all, despite all the quicksand, Black folks still are gonna find some joy through it all. So for me, the ending was really about that, making sure that despite it all, we still have joy.
We are absolutely going to come back to that point because I think that's really important to hold on. So I just want to forecast that we're going to come back to talk about the joy because I think that's really important. And to go ahead and say, other folks, if you want to talk about maybe the vision or intention that you brought to your particular role in 13th and Republic.
Absolutely. And you hear this a lot, actors will talk about their careers as performers as it's therapy when you get to perform. And I try to lean away from that often because it can be very selfish. And selfishly, that's kind of what I came to with this project. Like, I relate so heavy and so hard, you know, being a survivor of police brutality and walking down the streets of Cincinnati day in, day out and having these issues. So I was boiling. I wanted to scream, I wanted to shout, I wanted to kick. And I had this beautiful spirit of Darnell to work that and play with me and then go like, okay, why are we loud here? What is the intention here? He laid these layers down and we got down to the point where we settled on simmering. That surrounding of mental health, that cage of mental health, that soundscape being trapped in a box that he said, that was kind of a through line, like not being able to fully be free. I had a lot of movement that didn't allow me to break out of this box as well. So I had to simmer. I wasn't able to scream. I wasn't able to be full of rage. And it was healthy. Because of that, I was able to find moments to breathe and exhale and really think about what I was saying, as opposed to just taking out 30 years of being real pissed off. You know, I was able to simmer, and through that simmering, I was able to, I feel like, cook thoroughly, is why we're going with this metaphor, cook thoroughly by the end of it. So that was like what I was seeing, and rewatching it and seeing those moments where I remembered like, ooh, you really was mad, and having to add these layers across so that it could just give that focus on the intention of what we were trying to say. It was really nice.
I recall going to the Reds game. I love to go to the Reds games downtown. And as you go to the games, you will find folks from downtown playing their saxophone, playing bucket drums, and just enjoying the festive nature of it and making a few bucks on the side and contributing to just the sense of community that creates. And I thought that somehow when I was creating this, one of the numbers in the piece is a jazz number, and it's based on La Armée, which is an old Renaissance folk song. Well, that was from hundreds of years ago and doesn't have any squat to do with our contemporary bucket drumming or saxophone playing or rap or hip hop. But anyway, it was their modern moment. And the words to that are the armed man, beware the armed man. And it didn't miss me that the local peasant of 1390, 1400 was told, you watch out for that man in chivalry because he can get you. And in a sense, the parallel there between a powerful public safety factor person and the unarmed peasant seemed very parallel to me. And it wasn't lost on me that this story has arched over in time. And so I felt when we sang that, we needed to put it down on right outside the stadium, right in the community. And so we need bucket drums, we need a wailing saxophone, except we weren't gonna just do it the normal way. We're gonna let a singer sing the song, and the vision was to bridge time, but put us in the moment. And I want to call out the quartet. They did a fantastic job recording and singing this and finding all the different words from innocent and justice to singing I am a mother. the compassion they gave to their roles was so inspiring. And one little closer here on, we went through the last 6 months and the last year, we've been talking about knees. And football, we've been talking about taking a knee and the consequence to a player who takes the knee and now isn't playing. What's going on? And others taking a knee, and then a police officer's knee on a human being that takes his life. And here I am trying to write in the street, and I'm looking at these chords, and I'm telling you, that knee just walked right in and pressed down on that music. And I had to pull out other sounds to go down, to stop the breath. It was awful. I hated doing it, but it was honest. And I couldn't stop from doing it, if you will, because it was truth. And in truth is beauty. And so as an artist, your vision, that's what you were asking about, Jarrell, is your vision. And some little stories to go around that vision. Well, whether it's the joy of playing at the Reds game on some bucket drums, or whether it's this horrific news, when you're acting, when you're dancing, when you're writing, it hits you. It hits you, and you give it back. But hopefully we give it back in a way in the theater, on the stage, in a film that is beautiful. We put a frame around it. And so we tell everybody, this is not real life, this is art. And now you can experience it. You can experience the knee. It's legit. And then you can make your own decision. We don't make a decision for you. You are the audience. You make that decision. And so that's how the vision kind of crept into it for me.
I think for me, the part that I enjoy, and this is the part I enjoy in general about collaboration, is that, early on, I realized, especially after conversations with Darnell, that I was going to have to change some of the lyrics, some of the words to fit, particularly the mental health part, but just changes in the plot line, if you will, of the story. And so I was more than willing to do that. To a certain extent, this was true working with Khalil too, is that from my point of view, at least, the words are there to serve the music. And so whatever has to change, whatever has to be added on, whatever has to be dropped, edited out, that's always an exciting process for me. And so I don't have any sense of ownership over the words. I don't, there are no particular words that I feel like I need to keep, or I need to, don't want to use, or whatever. It's very much a fluid process for me, because the point is to get to that larger vision of what are we trying to accomplish in this particular part of the story. That's the most important thing. And so whatever has to be added on, whatever has to be sacrificed in order to get to that vision is key. It was key for me. But for me, that's the joy of collaboration, because you're editing, you're cutting, you're changing. The thing that Montez did with the words that we gave him when we did those Zoom things, it was great. It was wonderful to see him changing and say, I can't talk like that, and and have to change the words and so forth. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful collaborative experience for me.
That really connects to another one of the questions that we have here, as you're talking about the changes that were made, Tyrone. People want to know, are there other changes that you all might have made now that it's complete? Are there any other changes that you all might have considered making?
Personally, if I could go back and do it again, I definitely would have wanted to delve more into the mental health part of it, even perhaps changing part of the story in order to bring more of that into the story. Because when Darnell brought this up to me at a couple of the early conversations that we had over coffee, I thought about it and I realized that's absolutely the missing component to this story, to these stories that we're trying to tell. And I really wish I had, that we could have gone deeper into that part of the mental health part of it and exploded that, even more, even if that meant perhaps writing a completely different script and so forth. But, that's, it was such an important realization for me, after those conversations with Darnell. So that's the part I think I would have wanted to go deeper into, is the mental health part.
I just add on to that. Um, the work has been added on to 3 times. And I would second what Darnell has said and Tyrone has said and Montez has added in with his words. And so each time we've done the work, it's been in the now. And the now, you're writing the work and the now is going on ahead of you. And everything was changing so fast. I mean, back several months ago, we were in the news and we were seeing shooting after shooting after shooting when we thought we had begun to become sensitive to this and that we had alerted our public safety system in the aggregate to be aware. And some communities had met, Cincinnati for one, and had meetings after meetings for years, and had made some changes with some improvements that were measurable on a stat sheet. And still across the nation, we had this problem. So what I'm saying is, yeah, I would like to make changes that do exactly what Tyrone was saying. But I can also say the world is changing so fast right now, it's really hard to keep up, because it's not just the mental health issue, it's the rapidity and the repetition of this, that we're not able to address it in our society, that is just starting to boil up in me. And I don't know what that next movement would be, Tyrone. I can't right now. All I feel, like Darnell talked about, rage. My question is, what's the proper place for rage? How do you turn rage into something that helps solve the problem? And I don't have an answer for that. But if I had to write another piece to this, another movement, I would call on the writers and the dancers and the improvers to start to think about that, and we would exchange that. And I would take that and ask myself, what is that in sound?
I struggle with that question. I do like that question, but I struggle with it mainly because I, you know, nothing is ever finished for me, ever, ever. I don't think I've ever gotten to the end of a project and was like, that is it. I had so many doubts this past week. First time film director, I had a lot of doubts, and most of them stemmed from what I was worried that people would expect as opposed to what I wanted to do. And what I had to do, and what I am doing, because I'm still going through it, is remind myself that the factors that brought this together in the way it did were so special, and were so unique to this experience that I don't know if I would change anything, because I think it's back to what you were saying, Tyrone. If anything were changed, I think it would be a completely different thing. Which is not to say that's good or bad. I think it's a different thing. And if anything, I think, if I were to come back to this project and do something different with it, I would want actually even fewer words. I've been thinking about that, fewer words. I think about the power of movement. I'm currently rereading a bunch of movement books just to kind of get my brain back in that world and remembering the theory. For example, I went through a Michael Chekhov book again. I went through a Le Bon book again. I went through, just recently finished, oh my goodness, Tadashi Suzuki, the Way of Acting. And I'm now reading the Viewpoints book. And the thing that keeps coming to me is how movement is a universal language. There are certain gestures we can do that are ultimately a form of dance that tell a story. And I think about the power of that. And I think if I, in coming back to this, I would probably want fewer words and just trust the movement, because I went in a direction that wasn't linear. I wanted a story that was fragmented because I wanted it to match with what goes on in our heads, our stream of consciousness, that constant one direction and another. And um, you know, I think I really am content with it as it is, but I look forward to what happens next with it. You know what I mean? Where does it go next? Because a project is never done. Where does it go next? I don't know. Maybe fewer words.
So a slightly different question I have here, and it's a real short and simple. Folks actually want to know, will the soundtrack be available for purchase?
We are finishing up the details of the soundtrack, and we're going to see about distributing it through a music distributor. And people will be able to access it there through a streaming service. And that's going to take us a little while to get all that linkage up and make all those arrangements. But the music, that'll be what you heard is the instrumental part plus the singers. Will all be there. And so we can let folks know about that through Walter Hoop and through my website and anybody else's website that wants to link to it. I also hope to link to the words, the libretto, and then also link back to the project, because for me, it's the wholeness, it's the allness of it, you know? And we created this through Walter Hoop as a oneness. Even though each part can stand on its own, I can watch them dancing on the Purple People Bridge without any music, and I start smiling and want to stand up, you know, and put the music there, and I enjoy that even better. Or just play the music, and I enjoy that. And I think so. We want to put those connections into it.
Okay, thank you for that. So one of the other questions that I saw here that I thought is somewhat, a little interesting for us to take up is in what ways did gender come up for you all in the work? And how did gender come up within 13th and Republic for you all?
The best way I could answer that is that, so for example, being an educator, I try my best to have an extreme awareness in letting people share with me how they identify and embracing that immediately, right? And I thought it was the same thing with this process. I wanted every single person to be their authentic self through this. I didn't want them to heavily put on a character of any type. I wanted to see who you are and how you approach this storytelling. So in that respect, that was the way I approached gender, by just letting people exist without layering on anything extra. Now, of course, in the process of casting, it was important to me that I had representation as much as possible of diversity, because let me tell you, diversity is not just black and white. Diversity is a lot of things. And it was important to me that it was represented in that way. And I just, at the end of the day, as far as gender is concerned, it was just about who shows up and who works well, who do I know will come together and create this story. And that was the extent of it. I tried not to put, and please don't hear that as me saying I ignored gender, because gender can't be ignored. But what I wanted was just to have diversity and let that be whatever that was going to be.
I also wonder here if there's a sort of a question behind the question, maybe, um, or that might take us somewhere else. And so I really appreciate Khalil's point earlier, thinking about this very long history of surveillance, if we might think about policing as a type of surveillance and as something that we have a very long history and something that is not just within a US context, but we can think about surveillance beyond, US borders, right? Um, if there's also something, this question around gender is also what I like to talk about is maybe some of the gems that are scattered throughout. One of the ones when I was talking to Darnell, I noticed Elijah McClain's name, like posted, right? And so I wonder if there's also something about how 13th and Republic might dislodge some of our understandings of how surveillance impacts particular types of bodies. And so, yeah, I wonder if maybe there might be a conversation with you all about some of that other, the disruptions of how we think about surveillance, issues of police brutality, mental health issues impacting particular types of bodies, and the various types of bodies you wanted us to be aware of.
Ooh, that is
Well,
a dense one, and I love it.
yeah. Well, that's a great question, and but that's also what I meant before, and I think what Khalil meant too about how when you're creating a work of art, particularly, a different iteration of a piece that you've already done, how events, how current contemporary events, race ahead of you, and you can't really keep up with those events. And so, among other things, this started with, was built around the Timothy Thomas killing in 2001 in Cincinnati. But obviously, since then, and even during that period, but certainly since then, names like Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor have come to the fore as, victims of police violence too. And yet, that's the sort of thing, because we were still working with that model based upon the Iron Man and so forth. It was difficult to work these other issues into the current piece. I mean, here again, we're talking about what might be another iteration of this in the future. That might be more inclusive in terms of gender, and particularly, Elijah McClain, in Denver. That in particular, the story that's sort of sticking in my head and so forth. But again, there was no way to really work that into the current piece without literally revamping and starting almost from scratch. That's what it would have taken, because it's such a different issue in terms of both mental health and gender issues and sexual orientation issues and so forth. So, I guess the quote unquote good news is that, thanks to the current state of the United States, we had lots of material to work with on these issues in terms of different iterations around mental health, around gender and sexual orientation. But you know, this piece, 42 minutes, it could not include, does not include everything.
But I want to add on to that. I mean, one of the things that was important for me is, we are all aware of the disproportion of how Black women do not get their due justice in terms of the long history of violence against women, right? So adding on to what Tyrone just said, it was impossible to add every single thing, but how I tried to deal with that is by making sure that there was representation in the casting, and particularly looking at scene 4 and how it was so important to me that was because of the conflict of talking about that armed man. I wanted to explore what are the things we love in our Black community about Black bodies. I wanted to accentuate Black female bodies. I wanted to accentuate that Black masculinity from men that just exudes or that people read. It was important to me to explore all facets in every single way as far as the movement is concerned, particularly in the storytelling. But I wanted to do it in such a way to where it was more of unifying us as opposed to separating these things out as separate parts. I wanted to bring it all together into one big melting pot.
Music is interesting. You got me thinking, does music have a gender spectrum? And I think, I'm entitled to change my answer. I might turn around tomorrow and come up with a different answer. But I think today I don't really see musical notes and sounds and instruments and gestures and all that is the sonic array as particularly outlining or playing or defining a gender role. I think maybe that is within the human being. And music is something the human being feels. It's something we pour ourselves into. And so, Darrell, as you ask this really good question, and as Tyrone points out, the world was just moving so fast in front of us. This is definitely now, in this culture, woven into this question. I think you're right on target. And I think we would have to sit down and ask the question, well, what is the story we want to tell? That's where Tyrone, I think, was starting to take us. And I think that's where you were beginning to take us as you were kind of outlining the parameters. And it would be interesting to take a number of case studies and put them down and see what those stories are and what the public responses has been. Because that's where we started with Timothy Thomas. We found that a very rich fertile ground to go with what was the person and what did the community do. And that might create a very different work. So it's a wonderful question. And but from the music point of view, I don't assign these qualities to the notes themselves. I think they become assigned by us when we hear them in a certain context or with certain words or in certain scenes or certain dance gestures and so on.
Thank you. I'm sure we could be here longer talking about this. And, and I just want to, I guess, also recognize the ways that this could be different, giving sort of the unfortunate, sort of repetition of police brutality, loss of Black life, right, like that. It's continuous. And so like there's always an updating, but also acknowledging, it's not like the sisters were left out either, which I think is just also important in that conversation as you all were giving us some sort of rich things to think about. Because we are running short on time, I'm going to do a two-parter that I think might get us to the end of our time, but if not, I'll include another question. And so the two-parter, and I'll try to connect these. One, there was a question about how did everyone involved in the project take care of their own mental health throughout the process? And the second part, what I want to connect that to, going back a little bit, and one of the things I was really excited to talk with you all about is that very intentional ending on Black joy. We move from like, I'm tired, to also reclaiming a variety, every person who has a name, every person must be reclaimed, I think are the lyrics, right? We move the spectrum and we spend, I don't know how long it is, it feels like 10 minutes, it might be shorter than that, but like 10 minutes of like just pure Black joy. And so I wonder if you all might talk a little bit about what was it like perhaps attending to your own mental health as you're thinking about writing about performing, choreographing these very difficult stories and experiences. And then like can we talk about the Black joy at the end and what that was like and why that was so important?
Okay, so for me, all of this is summed up by our cast in 2 words. We called it a twerk 10. So no matter what we were doing, no matter the day, I mean, this is emotionally draining to bring this text to life, to dance and tell these stories, and to also be there in a space, most of the time a white occupied space, but we were able to create this safe space. And no matter what on the 10, our magical king queen Darnell will put on a twerk 10, and we just allowed ourselves to move to unapologetically Black music, no matter where we were. And just that big exhale and that celebration and that movement, it reset us, and it was good. It was a relief. Once we discovered we could do that, then anytime we were down low or drained, it helped us get through the rest of our time. As far as how I took care of myself mentally during all this, I was definitely very, very shut in. Around this time, I was also protesting out in the streets every day I could. At some point, I think 28 days in a row. So I had not taken a break, and I went straight into this project. So after every filming day, I would allow myself to walk, and I'd put on the SAULT album, Rise, which is incredible dance music, but it's also like insight on Black celebration and Black loss. And I would just do my twerk 10 all the way home. And that's how I did it, is just letting it out and kind of just leaving it where we were and taking up as much space as I possibly could. Yeah, twerk 10.
Oh boy. When you write these sounds and you wake up in the morning, the next morning, and you're tired from having written the sounds you just wrote that are tragic, and you read in the newspaper about another shooting and another death of a Black man, sometimes it's hard to go in and sit down and write the next note. So I have to get out. I have to touch the earth. I have to touch the soil, because the earth knows nothing of this. The earth is doing what it's done for millions of years. And so that garden, this beautiful earth, is for me a healing. And then I tell myself, I'm doing this because I want this story to be told. And I want to support everyone on this team. And for a moment, I feel everybody sitting here, right here. If these notes don't go the right way, how will the feet go the right way? How will the acting go the right way? How will I be fair to the words that I've received? And so that is always what you're trying to accomplish. And eventually, blessedly, you leave the world of, oh gee, I need to do this, and you transform into the world of, this is the music. This is it. And you walk in there, and you're in that space, and you do your next day's work. And sometimes when I would play the music of Dan Larkin, who wrote the great gospel numbers, we talked about him and we shared with it, but that's Dan's beautiful work and Dan's beautiful playing and the singer's beautiful singing. My wife would come in and all of a sudden she'd be behind me here in the room dancing around. And I would just be caught up in it. And I would be lifted off my seat. And so that's how I dealt with it. And I think there's a real role for all the different types of music, because all that different kind of music in there actually was like making yourself work, your whole human person in a lot of different ways. And so you wake up, you get recharged, you go into different spaces, and all of a sudden you can see it, and you can believe you can deal with this, and you make the world a better place, because that's why we're all here.
Thank you for that. I think Darnell, oh no, Tyrone, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, so I was probably I had the least amount of labor of everybody here to do, uh, because everyone else was working really hard in terms of the dance, dancing and rehearsing and memorizing lines and so forth, and Khalil with the music. But the words I had to change or add, it didn't involve that much labor, to be perfectly honest. And so for me, it was more of, I mean, in some ways, it was the opposite of a mental challenge, a mental health challenge, because the process of collaborating, which we started, I guess we started talking about this actually last fall, 2019, and then we got into the spring when things started to shut down. But the process of continuing to work on this project, um, of meeting occasionally with Darnell and Montez to go over the words, was rejuvenating for me. It was rejuvenating. Um, it was a reminder that there was an end, a light, if you will, at the end of this tunnel. Um, because initially it was going to be a theater piece, and then it was going to, then it became a film because of the pandemic. And so that involved more changes, but that was very rejuvenating for me, very exciting for me, because okay, we've got to make these other shifts and changes, and think about this in terms of a film, not in terms of theater, or even the sort of little opera that Khalil and I had done back in the early 2000s. And so all of that was rejuvenated because I was working, because even though I was isolated at home, but I was working with people, right? The collaboration was happening through, through Zoom and through exchanging of ideas and so forth. So, you know, and beyond that, I'm naturally introspective anyway, introverted. So the pandemic, it was almost a boon to me in some ways. It reinforced perhaps my worst, my wife says my worst aspect is like closing in on myself and getting into my own head. But these guys kept me thinking about, kept me thinking beyond myself. As I said earlier, how does this feed the project? That was the thing I had to keep number one in mind. And so it was actually, this, in some ways it was fortunate that this happened at this moment, because for me, it got me through this year.
Ooh, child. Let me tell you. So, I've been in therapy for a long time, and a conversation that comes up a lot is that my job isn't to fix everything, and it's something I struggle with. I feel a large and vast responsibility to act, and it shows itself in a lot of different ways. I work very hard at every single thing I do, and I don't say that in any kind of uh, ego way. I commit to everything because I'm a Black queer man, and I have to be as good as possible at every single thing. I think back to undergrad, I think back to grad school, and that constant struggle of working so hard because I felt that if I rested for a moment, um, my time would pass. I would not be enough. And so that's something I personally grapple with, and that coming into this process with that in mind, my incredibly high expectations on myself, despite, knowing full well, this is your first time directing and choreographing for film. And I had to give myself permission a lot of times, just truly giving myself permission to just exist. And it was hard because I've had a lot of loss, like a lot of people have, and trying to not let that infect the process. And I guess how I probably managed was just diving into the work. That's all I know. Do the work and trust that, for example, I was out there protesting with Montez as well. I was out there doing the footwork. I was out there sending the emails. I was out there doing the calls. I was doing panel discussions, all kinds of stuff while still doing this because I felt that I needed to be there. There's that quote about how be the leader you wanted somebody to be at one point in your life, and I'm a big believer in that. If you want to get something done, if you want to see something different happen, then you need to step up and you need to do it. Even if you don't know what you're doing, do it. And that honestly got me through it. And every single person's commitment to this project. I mean, I don't know how I could have gotten through this without Walter Hoop, because not only from the support of producing this project, but also from the support on a personal level, because I was going through a lot. And I guess the best way I know how to mentally cope is to do the work and to be around people who want to do the work just as badly. And that's what got me through it. And then moving on to, that final scene, it had to be there. Anybody who knows me knows that I am a very, I can be intense and I can be silly. You got those extremes. And it was important to me that this film, like, for example, one of the parts of this process that was really hard for me mentally is I never watched the videos before working on this project. I would not watch the videos or look at the photos. I can't handle that. I watch horror movies. I don't need to see dead people in real life, And I had to watch the videos. I had to look at the photos to really face it, ultimately, truly face it. And so I learned a lot about myself through this process. And I think that's the great thing about art. You never leave art the same way you go into it, And I think on the whole, what got me through this process was this process, honestly. So forever grateful for every single person who was a part of this, from the team to the cast to the people who helped out on the set, the crew. I mean, it was just across the board. People who just purely spoke out about the film and supported it in any capacity. That's what got me through it. It's the collective of all of that, like knowing that there was a team. It wasn't just me.
Here, here.
Y'all good people.
Yeah, it's been really great to sort of witness the collectivity, the collaboration, the sort of spirit that you all have. As we get ready to sort of wrap up, I wanted to, give you all a moment to close out, or any other additional shout outs that you might want to do, as Darnell was just doing, in terms of thanking all the folks who made this possible. But any sort of shout outs / closing remarks that you all might want to leave us on.
I would love to say something real quick. We got to give all the love in the world to Simeon Collins, our DP. Like, it is one thing when you have an idea. It is another thing when you can work with somebody to help make that idea come to life. Like, his understanding of his craft and his willingness to bend and play and also help. I mean, it was just, one of my favorite moments in the entire process was when I was standing behind him, ultimately dancing with him to move him where I wanted him to go, while the performers are going. And it's like, it was moments like that, that's why we do what we do. Like, and I send nothing but thanks to Simeon, because yes, hire him, everybody.
I just want to say it was in the script. The text speaks for itself. Get up off your butts. The work is not done. make sure you guys explore that Walter Hoop website, that you go down all through it. They got a little toolkit for you and everything to look through, so you know your next steps and actions to take, because this is a call to action. It's not just entertainment, so don't forget that.
You know, there's 5 people on the Zoom panel right here, but in my memory, back to 2003, there's hundreds of people, all the performers, audience members, people we all learned from, various iterations, people who came forward and gave grants to those earlier performances, organizations that supported it, special consultants we had on the state of Black Cincinnati to understand what is going on in the details of life in this city. I can't list it. It's deep, and I am forever grateful to everyone that has touched and been touched by this project, because they help it grow and become more meaningful as it goes into its life. You know, you make a work like this, and now it's its own life. It'll go where it wants to go. It's not ours anymore. It is itself. And it's like a child that will walk where it wants to walk and grow into the world in the way it wants to grow. We don't make that decision anymore. We're the parents, and we're gone now. So thanks to lots of people.
And the vocalists. I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure the vocalists, because throughout the process, and I promise it's the last thing I'm going to say, but throughout the process, the music was coming in pieces, you know, here and there, especially as Khalil was working things and getting them to that final stage. And we were getting a lot of things from earlier recordings, and to suddenly out of nowhere start listening to the music with the vocalists that were a part of the film process. It just magic, just magic. Just across the board. Mike Goist and the way he worked with those vocalists, it's just so much good. This was a huge undertaking, and every single person delivered. I'm proud.
People may not realize that because we did it in COVID, everything had to be done either in mask outside at great distance, or the vocalists had to be recorded one at a time in a studio. And every correspondence had to be done singly. No 2 people could really be together in the same space. So even for something like mixing, typically David and I would have been in the same space, David and Walter Hoop, and we would have been balancing out the tracks and doing everything. I mean, we're doing this all remotely, and the obstacles to accomplishing this are just double what they are in a normal setting. So I just want to call out Walter Hoop and everyone that was involved in this, because everybody had to step up to a higher bar than we've ever seen, as we've all had to do in our daily lives.
I just want to give a shout out to everybody that we've worked with over the years. I feel like I'm at the Academy Awards now, you know, but in particular, that stuff, you know, Audrey, because she introduced me to Darnell, and I think the first or second meeting, and she said to me before he even came, that there's this very interesting young man you have to meet. He's going to be working with us. And I said, okay, let's do it. And that started the whole thing again for me. So, so to Audrey too.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you all again for this amazing work that joins the chorus in a very long history of art that makes revolution irresistible. We have our marching orders, if you will, to figure out what we can do to do something that moves us somewhere forward. And so again, thank you all for this work that began back in 2001 and for making it happen underneath these particular circumstances. And so thanks and good night.
Thanks, Darrell.
Thank you.